Hi guys, welcome back to the Adaptive Zone podcast. My name is Matthew Boyd. I'm a physiotherapist and running coach. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're so inclined, share it with a friend. Today, we're joined by one of our athletes, my favorite athlete, Caitlin Miller. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So we're going to talk a little bit about your recent injury troubles and journey back to running, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So if before we get started on that, could you tell us a little bit about your background in running and how you got into it in the first place?
Yeah, so my entire kind of running journey was a little bit accidental in kind of a way. I started running maybe 10, 12 years ago just for fun, very casually. I just moved to New York City and I just could barely run for 5 minutes. And so I just wanted some fresh air, wanted to get to know my city. So I started truly with a Couch to 5K app on my phone, slowly built up over the years, fell into races, getting roped into races, found myself getting roped into a marathon. Flash forward 10 years, and I'm running all the time, and I really enjoy it and I really love it. And I want to say it was about 2021, 2022 that I wanted to get a little bit more serious with my running. I think I had 3 marathons under my belt at that time. So I had definitely been familiar with the long distance running and just doing it on my own, never with a real plan or coach or anything like that. But yeah, it was around 2022 that I was like, I'm gonna do this for real. I kind of got it in my head that maybe I wanted to do the world majors, and so I'm like, all right, let's do this for real. It's been a decade now. Let's actually put some real oomph behind it. And it was that year that I decided to take it a little bit more seriously that I actually started to get hurt. That was the year that I printed out a plan, had my little PDF workbook on my fridge. I was highlighting, kind of going off, doing whatever this internet coach was telling me to do. And I just had a series of injuries and first started out with some bursitis, had some bouts of that, and that kind of set me back, but it wasn't horrible. Was able to get back out there. And then flash forward a couple months and I was actually walking and I noticed some sharp pain in my right hip. And it didn't get better and it didn't get better. And then I couldn't run and I couldn't walk. And turns out I had a stress fracture in my hip. I had somehow, unbeknownst to me, don't know how to this day, got a stress fracture. And so that was just kind of a real bummer after really putting in all that effort, all that work for that year. I think that was in August, and I was training for the London Marathon in October. And so it was a real bummer, real blow to really kind of make that decision that I wanted to take my training more seriously. I thought I was doing everything right, and then to get injured was a real setback. And so once I got the injury, of course, I took it very seriously. I got all the MRIs. I did all the things I was supposed to do. Saw the doctor, took my time off, really gave my body that time to heal. Ended up going to PT. But it was hard. It was a challenge. It was emotionally, I would say, just as challenging as it was painful.
And what was that like? So, you start to get the pain and you're like, well, hopefully it's nothing. And then you get your butt booked for a scan. And then when they tell you what it is, did you understand what that meant at the time or?
I was so shocked. I thought I was going to the doctor for, I thought I had pulled something. I thought I'd pulled something in like my like stomach or something. It was the pain wasn't necessarily isolated to my hip even. It was kind of just the generalized area there. And I was like, oh man, did I pull my hamstring? Did I pull my stomach? Like I thought I just needed a good stretch or something, but I was doing my due diligence and went to the doctor, and I will never forget, I had to do a little hop test, stand on one foot and hop up and down, and I couldn't do it. And the doctor looked at me and he was like, I think you have a stress fracture. And I was like, nah, not me. That's I would have done nothing to have done that. I've got my plan. I've got everything. I've done everything right. And so it was completely out of the blue. I was very shocked. So shocked, though, that like even when I left the doctor's appointment, he was like, well, we'll send you in for the x-ray. And then if that doesn't show anything, we'll go to the MRI. I walked home. I was like hobbling home, but I still walked my New York City street blocks home because I was like, no, this guy's wrong. This guy's wrong. I'm
Right.
fine. I'll be okay. And, he understood the importance of figuring out what this was. So I think it was 2 days later, I went in for the x-ray. It showed nothing. So I was like, see, I told you I'm fine. I was convinced I was fine, even though I was still in pain. And then the next day I went in for the MRI, and I think this all started on a Monday, and by Friday I knew for
Well,
sure.
that's good. I mean, at least it
Yes,
was
the
done
speed at which I was
quickly.
able to find out was good, but
It's not what
I
you're
mean,
thinking about.
oh yeah, I think it started like on that Saturday or Sunday. I was still running. It was at walking and in pain. Monday, I went to the doctor. By Friday, they were telling me I need to stay off my feet for a couple weeks. I was just shocked. So,
And did you have big plans at that time? Because it sounds like you were sort of mid ramping up for.
yeah, I was about 8 weeks out from the London Marathon at that time.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a really big deal because I was a lottery winner for it from 2020. And so I had been waiting, I think at that point, 2 years to run this race. And I was 8 weeks out. I was just about to hit some of that, like really ramp up peak mileage. And I was just devastated, to go from like trying to run 13 miles, ramping up to 15, whatever, and to not even to being told you can't walk for more than 20 minutes at a time. So,
yeah, that's brutal. And so what happened from there? Like, what did the next few months look like?
yeah. So the next few months, I was lucky that I had a doctor who understood that this wasn't just something that I was going to kind of give up on. That running was still something that I wanted to do and that I loved, and that, one way or the other, I was going to run this marathon. And so I was really lucky that he understood that, and that, after I took the appropriate, I can't recall how long I was supposed to be off my feet, but a couple weeks, that he started to give me plans to inch back in, which I really appreciated. So I think if all this happened in August, by the end of September, October, I was gradually starting to get some run plans in, or some jog plans. And so the next couple weeks were hard because I was again told to not walk for more than 20 minutes, but eventually be able to like add time to that. And, within the next couple months, I was able to run for 5 minutes, walk for a minute, run for 5 minutes, walk for a minute. And it was truly like starting over. I hadn't done a plan like that since the first day I decided to run back in, 12 years ago. So it was step one for me. It was really humbling. But I was determined to get back. I had a marathon circled on my calendar for April, the London Marathon.
So it'd be a year later?
No, it wasn't even. It was April of 2023. So because of the pandemic, London
Right. I see what you mean.
had their marathon in October, which I was going to run, and then they were going to get back on their spring schedule. And luckily, they let me defer to that spring. So here I was in September, October, healing, easing back in, truly starting at step one, with April circled on my calendar of like, I want to be ready for that. So it was humbling, but it was something I was determined to do, and I just really wanted to do, and I wanted to do it safely. It kind of no longer was about hitting a certain time. It was about keeping myself healthy and injury free to get to that. I actually would say like the start line was my goal. Just getting to the start line of the London Marathon was my goal.
Yeah. And then, so talk to us about how you trained from there, which, it sounds like you've got to a place where you can run a little bit after this injury. but then you've got to go and do marathon training. So how did you bridge that gap?
Yeah, so that was really tricky. I went to physical therapy and I got my strength up. I think it was just kind of in talking to the doctor and the physical therapist there, it was really important that I, keep running. And they did encourage me to keep running. And I really appreciated that they were like, even if it's small, we want you to keep pushing, but we want you to get stronger. And so I just was really diligent about that. I did all the exercises at home. I went in bright and early every morning to the gym to do what I needed to do for therapy. I would run even if it seemed silly to only be running for 5 minutes. I knew it was the base that I needed to establish to make sure that I could get to that start line. And I remember at one point, I was getting really nervous to actually push the mileage, to push the distance. I was kind
Hmm.
of pulling back. And at one point, the therapist said, "You can do this. I need you to run. I need you to actually do it so we can get you there." And kind of just hearing him say that, I was like, you know what? I've done the work. I've built the base back up. I'm stronger. I'm putting in the work, and I have to just kind of trust that. And I
Hmm.
think that was actually what was harder for me more than getting up at 5 a.m. and going to the gym and doing the strength exercises or sitting at home with the bands. It was the mental component of it because I was afraid that it was going to happen again. I was
Yeah.
afraid because it came on so suddenly. If, I thought I was in great health. I thought I was fine. Like I said, I thought I just needed a good massage, a good stretch out. I was so afraid to start really ramping up again. But just kind of hearing that reminder that I put the work in and that I was ready and that it was my time to just start to push that, I think was just what I needed to hear. And then once I got past that barrier, 5-minute runs became 15-minute runs. Then it became back up to my, 3-mile run. And it just kind of built like normal and my body picked it right back up. And I was
Hmm.
really lucky that I was able to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like it was like, I don't want to risk it, right? Because it
Yeah.
came so out of nowhere the first time, like you felt fine one day and the next day you were being
Yep.
told to walk for the next 2 weeks. And
That's truly
yeah.
it. For me, it was just, and I think when we even first talked the first time, you asked me like how quick it came on. I was like, I had no idea. Like truly,
Hmm.
it was like a switch was flipped. And that's what I was afraid of the most is that the same thing would happen, that I would be fine, that I would be, out on a 6-mile run, beautiful 10K day, having a great time, and then couldn't get home or something like that. And yeah, the mental aspect of it, I think, was honestly one of the most challenging parts for me.
I bet. Because then even if you're feeling good, it's just in the back of your mind. Like I felt good before it happened the first time.
Oh yeah, and I
Yeah.
I became so tuned into every part of my body.
Yeah.
I was like, is that normal? Am I supposed to feel that? Is this a normal like twinge or, and yeah, that's just normal. I had kind of just it was almost like comical. I was like paying attention to
Yep.
like, oh,
We have a
I stepped
term
a little
for it.
weird. Yeah, exactly. I was just
It's
like,
called hypervigilance, we call it in the medical world. Yeah. It's
absolutely. I
normal.
mean, I think you've even seen that with me now, but I'm like, oh, I stepped a little weird. That must be, the end of the world or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, but that was also interesting. I kind of had to like pull myself back on that and also just learn to trust myself in a new way.
So you did take the risk. You were able to confront that barrier and overcome it, and then you got the mileage up. So how
Mhm.
did it go in London in the spring?
Um, my goal always was to get to the start line, and once I was at the start line, my goal was to get to the finish, and I did that. But I tell everyone London wasn't really my day. It just wasn't the race that I had wanted to run. I think I was really proud, of course, that I didn't get hurt, that I was able to kind of bounce back relatively quickly from an injury. But it wasn't fun the whole time. I just didn't have a great time running it. It wasn't, the puzzle pieces just weren't there for me that day. And it was a little bit disappointing. And I knew that I could do better. I knew that I wanted to do better. And because because I had more races on the calendar and because it was, wasn't the end goal for me to, stop at London. There were other marathons I wanted to tackle. I kind of thought, okay, maybe the goal shouldn't just be the start line. Maybe, why am I disappointed? Why am I feeling like this wasn't my day? Is there something I can do about that? So I kind of walked away from that race being like, okay, we did it, but we can do better. We can feel better. And that was kind of my main goal, is how do I feel better? What's the next step
What what
from
was
there?
it that you felt like was missing? Like why didn't you feel good?
I think a couple things. I think I'd hit my mileage too early. I think I peaked a little bit too early in my training. And so by the time it was race day, I was really tired. I was just kind of zonked when I knew very early on just running. I was like, oof, I'm going to feel every 26.2 of this. And I did. I mean, I was like, by the end, I was just like, oh my gosh, can we just be done? And
Hmm.
I don't like to feel that way when I race. Like, I like to take all the sights in and be with the crowd and all that. And I just was very aware of like what a slog it was. And so I
Hmm.
think part of it was that I just was misaligned with my training, that I wasn't pushing hard enough. I think maybe I was actually ready to push myself a little bit further, but because I was so nervous of injury or nervous of, all of the above and repeating the year again, that I didn't quite give myself the benefit of the doubt that I was ready. So I think it was just kind of a mixture of things, but it just didn't add up to the day that I wanted and the day that I had waited for so long. It it was just disappointing.
Hmm. Yeah, you were. It's supposed to be like a triumphant return, and it didn't feel that way.
It didn't. It didn't. I remember crossing the finish line and I just wanted to go home. I just wanted to
Hmm.
go back to the hotel and just not even really like celebrate or, kind of take all the fun pictures and just have the moment. I just didn't really want to do that, and my mom was there, my family was there, and of course they're proud. And you did it. You just had an injury a couple months ago. You're back out here, and I was like, I know, but it doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't. I didn't push myself the way I wanted to. I didn't. It just didn't quite meet the expectations.
So what did you decide to do from there?
So from there, and I run a fair number of races here in New York. I like to stay on the circuit there. There's some fun favorites that I do. So I continued on with those. But a goal of mine has always been to try, knock on wood, to run the world majors. And so after London, at that point, I'd already had New York, Chicago, and London under my belt. And I was like, okay, we've got a couple left. We're about halfway. What can I realistically do? And I thought about, let me just toss my hat into, the running for Tokyo. Just what if I didn't have any expectations, but I thought I would like to try it. And so I did. And when I found out that I got in as a charity runner running for Japan Cancer Society, which I was really excited to do, um, I knew that I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to have a repeat of my experience in London, something that I'm so excited for. I knew that I wanted to kind of have that moment, that triumphant moment of like, okay, we're doing this again, but what are we going to do different? So that was kind of what happened after London. I did the series of little races here, had my eyes on Tokyo, and was like, okay, let's make some changes. Let's figure out what didn't work before and what I can do to make it work now so I can have that finish line finish that I wanted.
Okay, okay. So is that when you started? Is that when you spoke to me?
I think so, yeah. So um I'm obviously friends with another one of your clients, and she'd also had injuries as well. And so I wanted to reach out because still in the back of my mind was my injury and just taking like my body and my health still very seriously. I mean, that's, I think, always going to be top priority for me, even no matter what my goal is. But yeah, so that's when I reached out to you, I think, is when I knew that Tokyo was on the books and was something that I wanted to do, and that I knew I wanted to do it differently. Um, and so that's when I reached out, and I think I really just wanted someone who, or an experience, I guess, that would understand all these different components, understand the components of wanting to push my body, but also wanting to do it in a way that would get me not only to the start line, which was my goal of London, but get me to the finish line and to make sure that I had that finish line experience that I wanted. So
Yeah.
I think that's about the trajectory for
And
when
it
I.
was that, well, what were you concerned about? Because you'd successfully rehabilitated this serious injury in good time and got back to a marathon within, less than a year, which is fantastic. Hasn't gone well, but obviously you couldn't train in the way you wanted to. What was it that you were worried about when
I
you were
was
thinking of Tokyo?
Yeah, I was worried that because a year before I wanted to take things seriously, and I think for the first time setting time goals for myself, really acknowledging, okay, you've been a runner for 10 plus years now. There are some goals I want to meet. I know I'm capable of this. I'm capable of both keeping the fun aspect of it, but also challenging myself and setting goals and, seeing what I can do. So I think for me, the time that I had tried to do that before and the method that I tried to do before resulted in injury. And I was kind of operating on my own blindly, just kind of doing my Google searches and again, printing out my little PDF online and just doing that. And I think, that can definitely work, but it didn't work for me. And I was afraid of just recreating the entire process again, of setting a goal, either not working to achieve it in a smart way and getting injury, or burning out too quickly, or just both, which I think were very real possibilities. And I think I wanted a little bit more than just kind of like a fingers crossed situation,
Mm,
just to keep
yeah.
doing what I've been doing, because it wasn't serving me anymore. And in fact, it had resulted in injury.
Yeah. And do you remember much about those first few months when you started working with us and how you found the training at first?
Yeah. It was unlike anything I was used to. Again, I had always kind of done my own thing. I started, again, just a very casual runner, just like, I'm going to take off and start going and put on music, and whatever I log is what I log. And so, and then I would, of course, progress into more structured runs and everything. But this was an entirely different program, an entirely different experience to my training. And I think I really enjoyed it, but I also was just kind of like almost discombobulated in a way, because I was just like, this is a shakeup from what I'm used to, or this is just not what I had done before, which then I would remind myself that was what I wanted. I wanted something different. I wanted something more structured. I wanted an experience that would both challenge me, but also keep me safe
Right.
and injury free. And so my memory of the first couple months and even the first couple weeks were the importance of strength, which I think, a lot of us runners just kind of would prefer to just run forever and not pick up a single weight. And I was incredibly guilty of that. And so I remember the first couple months, like actually sitting and lifting weights for a while and doing proper strength training and getting back to that and feeling sore in ways that I hadn't felt in a long time, and being like, okay, I'm gonna, I'm doing more than just taking off and running 10 miles on a Sunday. And then I think the other thing that I remember, and I actually probably I think I remember messaging you about this, was I can't run this slow. Some of the paces and some long training runs were having me run so much slower than I had run in a long time. And I was like, I'm gonna be walking at this stage. And you're like, no, you can do it. You're not gonna be walking. You'll be okay. And I
I
just remember
checked.
like,
I checked multiple times, and so did Heidi and Grace. We all checked, and we were like, "Yeah, no, it looks good." And you kept,
yeah,
"It doesn't
yeah.
look right." I was like, "It looks okay."
I was like, it was such a strange feeling and not what I was used to. Again, I think because I had just kind of operated on this just take off and go mentality with my runs before, there was just complete, this program just like, it just wasn't that, right? Like it was more thought out and there was reasoning behind every run and behind every pace. And I just was having to like stop and think and kind of like readjust that mentality. And so those were things that stuck out to me from early on of yeah, what I had to kind of like stop and give pause and almost just like trust the process in a way.
So once you'd calibrated and sort of adjusted to the changes, can you talk us through what it was like as you got closer to Tokyo?
I was getting really excited because I was feeling strong in ways that I hadn't necessarily felt strong in any of my previous marathon training experiences. I was feeling fast, and fast isn't necessarily something I would ever really describe myself as a runner. I again always, I run for fun, I run for my mental health, I run for my general body health. But I was feeling fast and I was feeling like, oh, these time goals that I'm setting for myself are looking real and aren't just something that I see on someone else's Instagram and I'm like, oh man, that looks nice. I wish I could do that. Um, and that was exciting to me. I mean, sure, there are always going to be off days or, you miss a workout or something like that. But the overall feeling as I started to inch closer and closer to Tokyo was like excitement and feeling genuinely really pumped to run the race. I think there were a couple moments, of course, where again, I messaged you and I was like, can I really hit this time? What is this possible? And I think either you or Heidi or Grace even maybe hopped on and were like, look, the data shows that you're training for this. Like that's what this all is. And like I was kind of like, wow, I'm I'm feeling that. Like what the data is showing and what my body feels is matching up. And it just took a minute for my mental side to kind of get back up to that speed too and make the connection of like, no, you're doing this. And the goals you're setting and the work you're putting in is going to tee you up for success and just fun too.
Yeah. And so how did it go on the trip to Tokyo?
It was it was so much fun. I was there for 10 days and so I had some days before to kind of get my body adjusted, which I would highly recommend for anyone going. You
So
need
far.
those days for sure because it's very, again, just jarring time change. But race day was just so much fun. I'm thinking about it right now and showing up, and I just had one of the best marathons I've had, and that was my fifth at this point. And it was not only just a really fun day, with great weather, that helps, of course, and being in Japan and seeing all of the beautiful sights, that helps, of course. But I felt good the entire time. There were moments on the course where I didn't actually know what mile I was at, and it didn't occur to me to look or to check. And I was like,
Yeah.
I wonder where I am. I'm probably pretty far right now. And so then I would look and I'd be like, oh, I'm at mile 15, not bad. And I felt like that kind of the whole way.
Mm.
There were moments, of course, where I got, a little tired and had to stop for water, whatever. But for the most part, I just was cruising and just enjoying kind of every mile of it. And once it kind of hit that, I like, man, I've got 2 miles left, or I've got not much time left. I still had some gas in me. I still was ready to go. And when I crossed the finish line and I looked at the time, like I'd hit my goal exactly on the
Yeah.
nose. And I just was like, I can't believe it.
And how did that feel like compared to London? Because that sounds quite different.
Entirely different experiences. For one, I mean, I think other than the time goal, which I think, there's that component, London wasn't fun. It should have been fun. Everything was set up for it to be a fun day. You know, the crowd was great. The weather, and it was, you know, April in London, so it was rainy,
London.
but um not much you can do about that. But it should have been a fun day. Like the sights, the scene, like everything should have been fun, but I wasn't having fun. I just was trudging through every mile. I was hyper aware of every just pounding step, and like it I got to the point where I was just kind of grumpy during it. I was just grumpy the whole way. And when I finished, I was just more of like a finally. But then in Japan, I was like stopping and looking and reading signs and looking at just crowds' faces and oh, I didn't know it was at mile 17 or, you know, something like that. And then when I finished, I just was walking and I was like, oh my gosh, like that was a blast. Like
Yeah.
that was just so much fun. I took a picture. I took like a selfie at the finish and I like posted on Instagram and I was like 10 out of 10 would recommend. And that's how exactly how I felt. Genuinely, I was just like, this just was a fun day. My body felt ready. I mentally was just in such a better place. And I think because I could just trust that my body knew what it needed to do, I was able to mentally have a good time and actually enjoy it. Whereas like I think in London, my body wasn't ready. And so it put that much more pressure on my brain to kind of power through.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's nice that from the majors you can kind of address that, right? Because London was supposed to be a wonderful experience and it obviously didn't pan out the way you were hoping. And then to go all the way to Tokyo, to get a place, to get the entry, to raise the money, to go all the way to Tokyo, to do all of the training, which takes a good 6 months. Like it's a lot. So to be able to have that experience that you've kind of earned at that point is makes it worthwhile, right? Because it's a lot of work.
Absolutely. It was kind of, I think there's the saying of like, you the training is the marathon and then marathon day is the celebration, and that's what it felt like for me
Hmm.
in Tokyo. All of the months leading up and doing all of the, you know, the fundraising and the travel planning and the strength training and the going to bed at 9 o'clock, like for me that was the marathon, that was the getting through it all. And so when actually showing up on marathon day, like that was just fun, that was just the cherry on top. And I feel like I really embodied that kind of saying, as cheesy as it is, but that just was the experience for me, is that I just knew that I did everything I could before getting there, and I was ready. So
Yeah. Well, what now?
what now? Well, you asked me that after Japan. I think I think it was like within the first couple days of after the marathon, I told you, I was like, well, I'm going to run Berlin in
Yeah.
September. And you were like, okay. So that's what's next. Going to run Berlin at the end of September and try to push myself even more and see what I'm able to do. And just now that I've had kind of the positive experiences and have healed and feel back truly on my feet, and that I'm able to trust my training and trust the process, I'm ready to go to Berlin.
And do you have like, because you know, Berlin was, sorry, Tokyo were like, I want to have a fun day. I don't want to be miserable like it was
Yep.
in London. What are your hopes for Berlin?
Well, I always want to have fun. I always want to have a good day. But I do think I'm to the point to where I can trust my body and trust the training and set goals for myself and set time goals for myself. You know, I wanted to run a 4-hour marathon and I did that. You know, what can I do next? What's another goal that I can set for myself and really kind of push and train for? And so I think doing that, setting that time goal, and not being afraid by that. I think that's something else that I've even talked to you about, is like, I've never really set time goals before because I've been afraid to actually try to train for them or
Hmm.
being let down. And I think now I've learned that I can do that. And now that I've learned I can do that safely and not that it won't always result in injury or a bad day or something like that. And so I think now that I have that freedom and that discovery that I can set, ambitious goals for myself and work really hard to achieve them, I think that's what I'm going to do. I don't know what the time goal is now, but
Yeah.
I feel way more comfortable setting that than ever before.
Yeah. And you can set it closer to the time because you've got some time to build some fitness before you want to choose a goal kind of
Yes.
randomly because you've sort of
Yeah, yeah.
set a new bar for yourself now. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, it's been quite the journey last few years from that serious injury through London being a bit miserable and all the way through to Tokyo being great and now on to Berlin. If you had your time over, have you learned anything that you would, maybe do differently? Um, or is it just like an experience that you had to have and this is the way it was?
It's a good question. I would definitely have preferred never to have gotten injured,
Mm,
but in some way, had I not gotten several injuries really throughout 2022, I had to take several time off even before I actually got to the stress fracture. Had I not had any of that, I don't know if I would have taken the steps that I needed to do to get to where I am to make sure that, you know, in 2024, I would have had a great race in Japan. I don't know
mm,
if I would have changed anything about my training had I not had the injury. I think
mm,
I would have just kept going, doing what I was doing, and maybe, gotten some injuries flicked in here and there. But maybe I don't know if I ever would have set time goals. I don't know if I ever would have returned to strength training. I know for a fact I never would have trained by zones or gone down like two paces that I would have been like, I'm not going to run that. So, while of course, I don't wish that I got injured or and I never would wish that upon anyone else, of course, but I do think it gave me a moment. It hit me at a moment where I needed to pause and reevaluate what I was doing with running and what wasn't working
mm.
because whatever I was doing wasn't working. And that caused the injury. And then again, having the bad day at London made me stop and pause. What am I doing that's not working? Because it's not aligned. So I think that
It's not so
was,
much something you would do differently. It's just a lesson learned. It's almost
I
like reality came and sort of called you up to say, if you want to do these events, there's a certain amount of, there's a certain level you have to reach. You have to put in the work. You have to
yep.
understand what to do and you have to sort of raise your game to be able to do that. And it sounds like that's kind of what the injuries made you do.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's entirely accurate. I mean, I don't think I ever would have done anything differently because I don't think I knew to do anything
Hmm.
differently,
Hmm.
And so I think now I've had that reality check and I have that understanding that in order to do what it is that I love so much, I need to put in a little bit more and put it in differently, not even necessarily more. I'm in some ways logging less miles, but I'm just being smarter about them. And
Hmm.
um, yeah, so I think I've almost changed my relationship with running in an interesting way.
How so?
I mean, I still do it because I love it and because makes me feel good. And to quote my dad, "You're a better person when you run." He told me that once, and I was like, "Thank you. I think I am too."
Is that a
Um,
compliment?
I think it's a compliment. I think just like my mood and my perspective is just like when I come back from a run, I'm like, it's great. But I think my relationship with running has changed because I don't know how to put it, but I think I now I've always respected running, but I think now I respect myself because I know that I'm putting in the work to take care of myself, that I'm doing the work that's required to meet the certain goals that I want to achieve rather than just, again, like looking at someone else's Instagram and being jealous that they've hit a certain time or whatever, that they're better than me or this or that. I respect myself and my relationship with running, that I'm able to put in the work, that I want to put in the work, that I'm excited to do that, and that when I do that, I see results and I achieve the things I want to do, that I have the good day, or that I'm able to do the fun race that I want to do. And I think before I just was like, oh no, not me. Like I'm just a casual runner, like I don't run, and my friends were like, but you've run several marathons. And now I'm like, yeah, I'm a runner and I work hard at it, and I respect the sport and I respect myself for doing it and loving it and putting in the work.
I think that's a lovely note to end on. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm sure a lot of that resonated with some of the listeners. And congratulations on your result in Tokyo. You did fantastic, and you work really
Thank you.
hard. You deserve it.
Thank you so much. I'm still excited from it.